Hello again, dear reader. It's your homeboy Omar S. for the West Coast Wave on Library and just Omar S on YouTube. Moving over to Library, I'll send you. I'll post a link to that app below in the comments, or I'm sorry, in the description below. This one just came in through the wire per the LA Times. Before I get into it, just want to say I hope you had a good weekend, as good as it could be right now in these times we're in. I know, I'm right there with you. But just wanted to say that I hope you're keeping the faith, and I hope that whatever it is that you're going through, that you know that's gonna be all right. That you have faith that things are gonna be okay, because that's all we need is about a mustard seed of faith, and we can move mountains. So this is for per the LA Times. Trump calls for law and order, threatens to deploy troops to major cities. Let's peep the
Thank you
link.
very much. My fellow Americans, my first and highest duty as president is to defend our great country and the American people. I swore an oath to uphold the laws of our nation, and that is exactly what I will do. All Americans were rightly sickened and revolted by the brutal death of George Floyd. My administration is fully committed that for George and his family, justice will be served. He will not have died in vain. But we cannot allow the righteous cries and peaceful protesters to be drowned out by an angry mob. The biggest victims of the rioting are peace-loving citizens in our poorest communities. And as their president, I will fight to keep them safe. I will fight to protect you. I am your president of law and order and an ally of all peaceful protesters. But in recent days, our nation has been gripped by professional anarchists, violent mobs, arsonists, looters, criminals, rioters, Antifa, and others. A number of state and local governments have failed to take necessary action to safeguard their residents. Innocent people have been savagely beaten, like the young man in Dallas, Texas, who was left dying on the street, or the woman in upstate New York viciously attacked by dangerous thugs. Small business owners have seen their dreams utterly destroyed. New York's finest have been hit in the face with bricks. Brave nurses who have battled the virus are afraid to leave their homes. A police precinct has been overrun. Here in the nation's capital, the Lincoln Memorial and the World War II Memorial have been vandalized. One of our most historic churches was set ablaze. A federal officer in California, an African-American enforcement hero, was shot and killed. These are not acts of peaceful protest. These are acts of domestic terror. The destruction of innocent life and the spilling of innocent blood is an offense to humanity and a crime against God. America needs creation, not destruction. Cooperation, not contempt. Security, not anarchy. Healing, not hatred. Justice, not chaos. This is our mission, and we will succeed. 100%, we will succeed. Our country always wins. That is why I am taking immediate presidential action to stop the violence and restore security and safety in America. I am mobilizing all available federal resources, civilian and military, to stop the rioting and looting, to end the destruction and arson, and to protect the rights of law-abiding Americans, including your Second Amendment rights. Therefore, the following measures are going into effect immediately. First, we are ending the riots and lawlessness that has spread throughout our country. We will end it now Today, I have strongly recommended to every governor to deploy the National Guard in sufficient numbers that we dominate the streets. Mayors and governors must establish an overwhelming law enforcement presence until the violence has been quelled. If a city or state refuses to take the actions that are necessary to defend the life and property of their residents, then I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them. I am also taking swift and decisive action to protect our great capital, Washington, D.C. What happened in this city last night was a total disgrace. As we speak, I am dispatching thousands and thousands of heavily armed soldiers, military personnel, and law enforcement officers to stop the rioting, looting, vandalism, assaults, and the wanton destruction of property. We are putting everybody on warning. Our 7 o'clock curfew will be strictly enforced. Those who threaten innocent life and property will be arrested, detained, and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I want the organizers of this terror to be on notice that you will face severe criminal penalties and lengthy sentences in jail. This includes Antifa and others who are leading instigators of this violence. One law and order, and that is what it is. One law. We have one beautiful law. And once that is restored and fully restored, we will help you, we will help your business, and we will help your family. America is founded upon the rule of law. It is the foundation of our prosperity, our freedom, and our very way of life. But where there is no law, there is no opportunity. Where there is no justice, there is no liberty. Where there is no safety, there is no future. We must never give in to anger or hatred. If malice or violence reigns, then none of us is free. I take these actions today with firm resolve and with a true and passionate love for our country. By far, our greatest days lie ahead.
All right, ladies and gents, there you have it. Curfew's at 7. Question for you, dear reader. When do you think they're going to take that away? All right, so just gonna this that was my first time seeing that, and this is my first time reading this. So hopefully we don't go over what he just said too much. Quotes wise. So Trump calls for law and order, threatens to deploy troops to major cities. Sorry if you hear some kids running around there in the background. I'm over here. Well, I guess I should get to a closer area since I'm reading to you. All right. So President Trump also, let's go back to this is by Noah Bierman, Ellie Stokels, and Chris Majarian. Per the LA Times, June 1st, 10:15 a.m. It was updated at 4:26 p.m. At 7:41 p.m., June 1st. President Trump, declaring himself a president of law and order, threatened Monday to deploy the military to cities where, he said, governors and local officials have failed to take necessary action to end civil unrest. These are not acts of peaceful protests, Trump declared during a brief speech in the White House Rose Garden, referring to the demonstrations and sometimes violent acts that have broken out in dozens of major cities. These are acts of domestic terror. Trump said he was dispatching thousands and thousands of heavily armed soldiers, military personnel, and law enforcement officers to end civil unrest. And let's take a look at the pictures here. I can't breathe. Protesters face off with police in downtown Santa Monica as unrest continues in the wake of the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. So more morons Looters grab, or sorry, I say, looters grab merchandise at the REI store in Santa Monica. Suspected looters sit handcuffed on Santa Monica Boulevard after being spotted running from a CVS store nearby. Yeah, raid the CVS where your grandpa gets her medication and his medication and your grandma gets her medication from. Freaking. Anyways, I'm going to keep moving forward. He declared himself an ally of legitimate protesters, blaming violence and looting on anarchists. But even as he did so, police fired into peaceful crowds across the street from the White House and advanced on horseback. Reporters in the Rose Garden could hear booms in the background. Once police and National Guard units had cleared Lafayette Park just north of the White House of demonstrators, using flashbang grenades and tear gas to clear away demonstrators, Trump, in a show of force, walked across the park to St. John's Episcopal Church, where a fire had been set the previous night. He held a Bible and posed for photos in front of the boarded up building. Of course, he took that picture for his voters out there in the South. Oops, sorry about that. I betcha. He's very opportunistic. He reminds me of Kamala Harris in the levels of opportunism that he's got. Anyways, once police and National Guard units had cleared Lafayette Park just north. Okay, we already said that. A phalanx of Secret Service agents surrounded Trump as he crossed the park to the church. Police stood guard on the deserted streets, and helicopters buzzed overhead. Attorney General William Barr, Defense Secretary Mark Esper, and Chief of Staff Mark Meadows were among the high-ranking officials with Trump. The made-for-TV confrontation fit with Trump's admiration for strongmen in other countries. But his move was likely to spark fear and anger among many Americans who have taken to the streets, potentially escalating the tense situation in many America's cities. Trump's bellicose language and his threat to use the 19th Century Insurrection Act to allow deployment of military personnel came after 48 hours in which he had been mostly silent in public, except for his angry Twitter finger. In private, however, during a call with governors Monday, a few hours before his announcement, the president, who tweeted Saturday that looting leads to shooting, pushed for a harsher crackdown. Most of you are weak, Trump said, berating the governors and urging them to dominate the protesters, according to a person on the call. He urged state officials to track down lawbreakers and send them to prison for 5 to 10 years. Can you just imagine being in that call with Trump telling you, like, you're weak? You need to dominate. So a second person with knowledge of the call described the president as bellicose, raising the possibility of military action and describing the situation as a war. The message was echoed by Esper, who described the need to dominate the battle space, language normally used to describe the far-flung conflict zones instead of American streets. The president's comments stunned state leaders who have been struggling to diffuse tensions. I know I should be surprised when I hear incendiary words like this from him, but I'm not. Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker, a moderate Republican, said at a briefing after the call. At so many times during these past several weeks, when the country needed compassion and leadership the most, he was simply nowhere to be found. Instead, we got bitterness, combativeness, and self-interest. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, a Democrat, told reporters that he thanked Trump for his input but made it clear he disagreed. A posture of a force on the ground is unsustainable militarily. It's unsustainable socially because it's the antithesis of how we live, he said. Walz took issue with Trump's claim that the world is laughing at the urban uprisings across America. Nobody's laughing here, he said. We're in pain, we're crying. Trump's remarks made clear that he has no intention on pursuing the role of national healer that past presidents have often assumed during moments of unrest. It's a role that many in both parties agreed he would not be likely to succeed in. Even the White House has tacitly conceded that point, downplaying the utility of a presidential speech. Continuous statements, as he's made day and day again, they don't stop anarchy. What stops anarchy is action. And that's what the president is working on right now. Trump's press secretary, Kayleigh Kayleigh McEnany said during a news briefing Monday, at which she invoked the amorphous left-wing movement Antifa, a contraction of anti-fascist, which the White House has sought to blame for the violent protests. Republican Senator John Toon of South Dakota, a member of his party's Senate leadership. I'm sorry, let me repeat that, dear reader. I am right here in case you are not following along anymore. Republican Senator John Toon of South Dakota, a member of his party's Senate leadership, offered dismissively faint praise Monday afternoon. The country is looking for healing and calm, and I think the president needs to project that in his tone, Toon said. He masters that sometimes. The view was harsher from Trump's critics. There's an overwhelming body of evidence out there about how incapable most Americans think he is of handling a moment like this. Someone whose whole entire political predicate was based on division, said Cornell Belcher, formerly a pollster for Barack Obama. How, in a moment when we need a unified voice, can he step in and lead? He can't. McEnany pointed to Trump's comments during a Florida space launch on Saturday, in which he called the death of George Floyd a grave tragedy, complaining that the media has ignored them. McEnany also hinted that more federal resources would be deployed and that Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Mark A. Milley would be overseeing more involvement by the National Guard. What the president has said is he wants to dominate the streets with National Guard, McEnany said. Trump's last Oval Office address during the early days of the coronavirus outbreak was widely panned as a listless performance that did little to calm a nervous nation. Trump made misstatements during that speech about the scope of the travel ban he was announcing that caused many Americans traveling in Europe to panic, generating a spike in travel that clogged airports and some experts believe played a noticeable role in spreading the virus. On Friday night, Trump was whisked into the underground bunker at the White House as skirmishes intensified just outside the gates. According to an administration official speaking on the condition of anonymity, he has been holed up in the White House since Saturday night, remaining out of sight as some buildings near its perimeter burned. Over the last 48 hours, as police and rioters continued to clash just a few hundred feet from his residence, he continued to tweet as though he were a bystander, attacking the media and left-wing groups he selectively blamed for the violence. The contrast between Trump and his predecessors became even clearer when Obama on Monday released an essay titled "How to Make This Moment the Turning Point for Real Change," which offered support, advice, and hope for the protesters while denouncing the small minority of folks who've resorted to violence in various forms. Trump has long staked his political position on a law and order message, a phrase he tweeted in all caps over the weekend, and the strong undercurrent of white identity politics buzzing beneath his words and actions. He spent months in 2017 denouncing former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick for lack of patriotism after he took a knee to protest the kinds of police brutality and racism at the heart of the current protests. In 2017, Trump defended some of the white supremacists marching in Charlottesville, Virginia, as very fine people. This year, he has defended white gun-wielding protesters who stormed some state capitals to protest stay-at-home orders amid the pandemic, while labeling the first wave of protesters in Minneapolis last week as thugs. McEnany asked why Trump was condemning Antifa but not conservative militia groups also showing to have infiltrated some recent protest marches, pointed to Trump's long history of condemning white supremacy and racism. "We've had 3 years of pot stirring from the White House," said Timothy Naftali, former director of the Richard Nixon Presidential Library and Museum. His go-to has always been to stir anger, to highlight and inflame, and he did it with glee and for political gain and because he just likes to do it. Those qualities, while troubling to many Americans, mattered less politically before the explosion of problems during the fourth year of Trump's term. Imagine you are in Trump's shoes. You have been dealing with the virus, you've been dealing with the economy, and you've been dealing with China, and then suddenly there's this whole eruption, said Newt Gingrich, the former Republican House Speaker and Trump ally. You're trying to wrap your head around this. Gingrich said he I don't know what that T's doing there. Gingrich said he does not see the president's role as a healer. Instead, he advocated for Trump to define a civil war between people who want to destroy the country and those who want to keep it. There you go. People just promoting the civil war. Gingrich, I'm going to read that one here again for you, dear reader, just to emphasize. Gingrich said he doesn't see the president's role as a healer. Instead, he advocated for Trump to define a civil war between people who want to destroy the country and those who want to keep it. It's not going to calm things because the people you're up against don't want to calm anything, said Gingrich, who went on the president's favorite TV programs, Fox and Friends, to push the idea. Even some conservatives are turned off by such rhetoric. One person involved in the re election effort called the White House response puzzling and lacking strategy. Remember when presidents would address the nation to reassure us? Eric Erickson, a conservative blogger, wrote on Twitter. And many closest to the cities, including Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, have said Trump would be better off staying on the sidelines. His rhetoric only inflames that, and he should sometimes just stop talking, she said Sunday in an interview on CBS. Times staff writer Molly O'Toole in Minneapolis contributed to this report. Noah Bierman covers the White House in Washington, D.C. for the LA Times. He previously wrote for the paper's national desk. Eli Stokols is a White House reporter based in the LA Times' Washington, D.C. bureau. Chris Mergian sorry, covers the White House and President Trump from the Los Angeles Times' D.C. bureau. He previously wrote about the Russia investigation. Right, lying all over the place about that. Anyways, dear reader, thank you again for tuning in. More on the way to keep you informed. Let me know what you think of Trump's calls for law and order